Hello guys! In today's video I'd like to show you how I sewed this puffer jacket. I used a Grasser pattern number 782 for it. This project was a real challenge, as it was my first ever piece of outerwear sewn all by myself. It turned out great, I absolutely love it. So let's start. For this project I picked a lavender 2-layered Loro Piana fabric. It has a hydrophilic membrane and is water, wind and dirt proof. Because of that, a hot iron could damage the fabric. So we should use only non-fusible interlining with it. Iron only on the front side of the fabric with a slightly warm iron without steam. I also used a cotton cloth to be on the safe side. I cut 2 side front parts and 2 central front parts that are one piece with a collar. I didn't film that, but I also cut 1 back piece, 2 sleeves, 2 facing pieces, 4 pockets, 2 cuffs, 1 back neckline facing, 1 bottom back facing piece and 2 bottom front facing pieces, 1 belt and 1 belt loops piece, 1 hanger loop and 2 technical layers for magnets. Don't forget to transfer all the marks from the pattern to our fabric. We should also transfer all the quilting lines. Be careful, some of them are straight lines and some are not. I picked Isosoft 200 grams per square meter as an insulation material. Cut 2 side front parts and 2 central front parts that are one piece with a collar, 1 back piece, 2 sleeves, 1 belt and 2 pieces of the facing's upper part. There is a special mark for that on the pattern. The thing is that we should add extra 5 to 10 centimeters to each edge. We'll need this later when quilting. We should also cut some non-fusible interlining parts, such as 2 pieces of the facing's lower part, 1 bottom back facing piece and 2 bottom front facing pieces, and 1 back neckline facing. Our next step is quilting. I'll show you how I do it using a sleeve as an example. First of all, I choose a central quilting line, and it is important to start from the center, not from the side. Pin the fabric to the insulation material and make a line of machine stitches. I used a 2.8 mm stitch length. Use a special walking foot. It helps to pull several layers of fabric through the machine evenly. When the first line of stitches is made, I pin the layers along the second quilting line, pushing the Isosoft material inside a little bit. This is done to protect our future sleeve from shrinking, and it also gives the needed volume. Then I make the second line of stitches and repeat this process until I reach the edges. When all the horizontal lines are ready, I push the insulation material inside at the side edges and stitch. Then I increase my stitch length to 4 mm and stitch 8 mm off the edges along the perimeter. It'll help us to avoid pin tucks while attaching the pieces to each other. After that, I cut the excess insulation off. Repeat the same steps for the other sleeve, the back piece, and 2 side front parts. We'll also need 2 central front parts, but be careful, there is a left one and a right one. At this stage, we want only the right one to be attached to the insulation material. I did it for both pieces and had to unsew the left one later. If you are not sure which one is left and which is right, put this aside, we'll return to this step later. Then I strengthen a back neckline facing, 1 bottom back facing piece and 2 bottom front facing pieces with non-fusible interlining. I pin the pieces together and then stitch along the perimeter. Okay, we've finished the prep work, let's start sewing. As I didn't make a mock-up, I wasn't sure about the fitting. That's why I decided to make the shoulder seams first, but I also needed to check the future pockets and belt loops position. So I pinned 1 pocket piece to the side front part of our puffer jacket, right sides inside. I've also prepared the belt loops by pinning its long sides together, right sides inside, stitching with a 7 mm seam allowance and turning the thin out. Pin the belt loops to the side front parts using the pattern markings. The loop's length should be the belt's length plus 1 cm plus seam allowances. Thus 6 plus 1 plus 2 equals 9 cm each or even more. Pin side front parts with the back piece at their shoulder seams and stitch with a 1 cm seam allowance. cut the seam allowances at several places by 2 or 3 mm. This will prevent our seams from constricting. As we can't press the seams flat with an iron, as we don't want to ruin the waterproof features of the fabric, we'll open the seam allowances and sew them on to the insulation by hand. As the shoulder seams will experience more rain and snow on them in future, it's good to strengthen their waterproof features with a strip of fabric. I cut it 2 cm wide and then stitch on by hand right side inside to the insulation material, opening and securing the seam allowances at the same time. I also found it easier to use a sewing pad as an underlying surface. Then I pin the back and 2 side front parts together, right sides inside, at the side seams. To make a belt, we should use only a half of the thickness of the insulation material. So I split it in two. Then pin the belt piece to the insulation and stitch along the perimeter with a 4 mm stitch length. We don't need to push the Isosoft under the main fabric, as we did before with the other puffer jacket parts, as we don't want it to become too thick. Cut the excess of the insulation material off. Then I marked the central quilting line with an erasable marker and made a line of machine stitches on it. After that, I pinned the belt's edges together, right sides inside, using the markings and stitched with a 7 mm seam allowance. Don't forget to leave a 10 cm long opening, so you could turn the thing out later. Cut off the excess seam allowance at the corners and turn the belt out. Make the corners neat with your fingers. Then use an invisible stitch by hand to close the opening. Press the belt carefully. Use low iron temperature and a cotton cloth. During the fitting, I checked the position of the pockets. It was okay for me. Overall volume of the future puffer jacket and its length, again okay for me, and the position of the belt loops. I had to move them up by several centimeters, so that the belt was directly on my waist. Then I pinned two bottom front facing pieces and the bottom back facing piece to the side front parts and the back correspondingly. Be careful, the facing's upper edge at the pattern stands for the upper edge of the facing when it is already turned inside. Stitch with a 7 mm seam allowance. Cut the seam allowances at several places by 2 or 3 mm. This will prevent our seams from constricting. Turn the facings towards the seam allowances and top stitch by 1 mm off the previous seams, thus attaching the seam allowances to the facings. I pinned two pocket pieces to the back and one remaining pocket piece to the second side front part, changed the belt loop's position and secured them with machine stitches. Then secured all the pockets in place by machine with an 8 mm seam allowance. The previous quilting seam shouldn't be seen. Turn the pockets towards the seam allowances and top stitched by 1 mm off the previous seam, thus attaching the seam allowance to the pocket. We want to do that only with the pockets attached to the front pieces. Use the markings and pin the sleeves' upper edges to the armholes. Stitch with a 1 cm seam allowance. Check that there are no pin tucks at the right side. Mark 12 cm off the future side seams. Cut the seam allowances at several places by 2 or 3 mm deep. Open the seam allowances and hand stitch them to the insulation, starting from and ending at these marks. Repeat the same steps for the other sleeve. Before stitching the side seams up, we want to make sure our quilting lines coincide. That's why I align them and pin the back and side front pieces together, right sides inside, and then secure these places by hand stitches. After that, I also secure them by machine. Then check if the quilting lines do coincide. If they still don't, unseam the area and repeat the process, or just don't mind and leave it be. By the way, be careful, we don't stitch the quilting lines together at the pocket area. Pin the side front parts and the back piece together, right sides inside, starting from the bottom facings, then going along the pockets and ending at the sleeves ends. Use the marks, they are extremely helpful here. If they are somehow lost, transfer them from the pattern once again. I also close the pocket openings with some pins. That will protect the layers from shifting. Stitch with a 1 cm seam allowance. I check if there is all okay at the right side. And then stitch at the pocket area once again to strengthen it. Then I remove the pins from the pocket openings. Put the pocket to the side front part and cut the back's seam allowance diagonally at the beginning and ending of the pocket. Open the seam allowances and sew them on to the insulation by hand. Repeat for the second side. Don't touch the seam allowance near the pocket at the back. Sew it on only to the side front part. That's it for now. We'll continue this project in the second video. Thank you for watching and sewing with me. Bye!